Well, it's update time. Pretty much most stuff is done on this thing. It has been 3 or 4 years almost that I bought this car after my original one was crashed. Here's the list of stuff still to do. Just cosmetic stuff really. Fit the skirts, replace the windscreen, finish the bumper. I've just put some stock headers on there because I don't really want to spend $2,000 on fancy headers just yet. But yeah, there's not really that much to do, and then this thing will be running. What I've done this afternoon was just put the alternator on and the belts and just hooked everything up. I've still got to find a 12-volt trigger for my flex fuel sensor. So basically that wire just goes to a wire somewhere on the car that when the ignition is on, it gets 12 volts. I've still got to buy a decent air filter. But basically everything's in now, and filled it with oil, and I just thought I'd run through this for anybody who's not sure about starting an engine for the first time. After it's been rebuilt or you've just put a new engine in. I haven't even filled it with fluids yet. But the number one thing that you want to do once filling it with oil is make sure it gets oil pressure. So you can see here I've got my leads out, unplugged. And what I've done for safety's sake is I've unplugged the cam. There goes my torch. I've unplugged the cam angle sensor up here. Now, because I'm on a link ECU, I could just switch it off. Switch off the injectors, switch off the coil in the ECU, but for safety's sake, I just unplugged the cam angle sensor. Now, before I'd finished up the fuel system, I've got this fuse here. This is my 12 volt that goes to my relay for my fuel pump. When I was just testing to get fuel pressure originally, I had taken the fuse out so it wasn't pumping fuel in. So essentially what I was able to do was I was able to find out whether the engine got oil pressure before I'd finished off my fuel system. I hadn't actually finished connecting it. So yeah, I took out that fuse. Now I've finished the fuel system, and when you turn the key, it actually primes, the fuel pressure gauge goes up. I've also got an electronic fuel pressure sensor that goes to the ECU. But what I did was I pulled all the plugs. So when you crank the engine over, pistons are going up and down. It's not making compression and putting pressure on the bearings when it doesn't have oil pressure. Now, please don't do what I did and don't put your oil pump on dry, okay? If you're fitting, when you got your engine on the stand, put some oil in the oil pump, move it around with your fingers to get oil pumping in there, okay? Because I didn't do that, there is the oil pressure sensor is just down there. And what I did was I took the oil pressure sensor out, and using a syringe, I syringed a bunch of oil in there as I wound the engine over by hand. That then filled the oil pump. And then when I came here to crank it, what I looked for is see the oil symbol. When you crank it, See how it just went off? That means it's got oil pressure, okay? So that's the very first thing that you do. The next thing is, if you're on a standalone ECU, I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do all this, but I'll just give you a quick run through. You need to calibrate the throttle position. You need to calibrate your map sensor. I'm actually having a bit of trouble with that at the moment, as you can see here. What I've got is this runtime values thing up, and the way you get that is you go tuning, and it's the first header, runtime values. I'll just get it back up again, tuning. This is for Link anyway. And these are all your runtime values here. It'll tell you if you've got errors. I've got an error here because of that red wire for the ethanol sensor. But also my map sensor is reading 300 kPa, and right now that's about 200 kPa than what it should be. So if we have a look at here, the barometric pressure is 100 kPa, which is 1 atmosphere. It's currently reading way more than it should, so that's an error that I have to fix. But what I've gone through is, if you've seen in a previous video where I wired up my expansion connector, so my oil pressure and temp, my fuel pressure, my flex fuel, and my IAT, I need to go to all these headings, so temp 3, and I've assigned that to the IAT. Temp 4 is the oil temperature, AN volt 6, blah, blah, blah. And so the way you do that is you go into the side here, just here, ECU settings, find what you're looking for. So let's go with this. Actually, it's on compare mode at the moment. Close compare. Let's go here. And then if we go to, no, let's go here. So AN volt. So you can see here, temp 3, I've set to inlet air temp. Volt 1 is the map sensor. Fuel pressure, I set that. That was at off, and then AN volt 6, because that's what I had wired it to. Okay, so this was my little wiring diagram that I used when I made it up. So you set everything up, everything's going fine, except that my map sensor is giving me an error. So I'm going to go online and figure out, you know, there's a solution whereby I might have to hook up a line, suck on the map sensor, and then the calibration is up here, down the bottom here in ECU controls, map sensor calibration. I'll show you what it's doing. So we've gone to calibrate it. Do you want to perform a calibration? Yes. And it says it's failed because the values are not what it's expecting. So I've got to fix that. Make sure that all of this stuff that you've set up, wired up, is working properly. You've got an oil pressure, you've got fuel pressure, you don't have any leaks, and then you can start the engine. Don't just sort of go, oh, well, I'll figure that out later. I mean, you can, but if you blow up your engine for something silly because you know, you didn't chase down an error, well, you know, don't blame me. But there you go. If you found that helpful, leave us a like. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And do me a favor and click subscribe, because this has been a long slog. Still got a little bit to go, and I appreciate you guys watching. So with that said, I'm going to figure out what's going on with this map sensor, and I'll let you know how I go. Thanks for watching.